is like ranked 4th in the nation.
Oh, wow. I think Don stuck his head out.
How are you doing? That's impressive.
Busy, but good. It's good, yeah. I'm good.
I will have Jones get on.
Great.
All right. We'll call this meeting convene here, and we're going to start with our public comment. We have 2 speakers this evening. Our first speaker is Dee Dee Armstrong. Come on in. It's just right here. Let me, and in fact, I should read the expectations. Sorry if you
Go
can
ahead.
sit.
Go ahead.
The school board encourages community input. While comments and questions are welcome, law prohibits the board from discussing concerns about individual employees or students in a public meeting. The board will not deliberate, discuss, or engage in conversation with speakers. However, the board may ask administration to review the concerns presented. Speakers must present their testimony in a respectful manner. Vulgarity, character attacks, malice, or specific complaints identifying staff or students by name or implication will not be permitted. We will stop the proceedings immediately if employee or student privacy issues are raised and direct the speaker to forward comments regarding individual employees or students to the superintendent. With that, the floor is yours, Dee Dee.
Okay. I'm Dee Dee Armstrong. I'm from Afton, Minnesota. So, thinking back over the last 18 months that you all have been sitting on the board, how many minutes do you think that you have been in board meetings? And I will give you a hint because some of your meetings go 4 and 5 hours, so it's a lot of minutes. But how were those minutes spent? What items were on the agenda? The administrators and the board chair set the agenda. So those are the people who prioritize what is important. And by prioritize, I mean that the things that make the agenda are the things that are seen as important enough to get discussed. Over the last 18 months, I've gone through every single agenda, and if I'm really generous and cover things that aren't really totally involved, there's been a total of 12 times that you all have discussed actual academics. Minnesota State Board of Education put out their reading proficiency. Oh, shout out to the Pony Pride Facebook group. You guys said 3rd graders can't read, so I'm gonna give you a shout out. Our 3rd graders cannot read. We came out today, should be on the agenda because I knew 3 weeks ago that this report was coming out today. We're at 51% of 3rd graders can read. That's deplorable, that's embarrassing. You're the Board of Education. You're not the Board of bathrooms and bus garages. You're the Board of Education. It should be like shouting from the rooftops. We're gonna discuss it. St. Croix Prep outperforms us annually every single year. We don't discuss it. St. Croix Prep student body demographics, because y'all want to tell that St. Croix Prep is somehow different demographics. They're almost identical all the way down in BIPOC, special ed, free and reduced lunch, and English language learners. Our 10th grade kids, their reading proficiency versus graduation rate. Their proficiency is much lower than our graduation rate. Not sure how that happens if we don't even have 70%. Not one single year do we have 70% of our 10th graders able to read at grade level. That's embarrassing. How do we graduate them at 90% if less than 70 are at grade level reading? Then the other thing we get to hear often is that this following 3rd grade is not right, so we're gonna follow the cohorts. Every year, this is the 3rd grade reading, and it goes down and down and down. And then the yellow is what happens to that same one that as they progress through the year. So I took the 3rd graders in 2015, moved them up to this year, so I can track it. They never catch up. We never even, not for any single grade do we hit 80%. State statute that you guys publish says that a school district must adopt a local literacy plan to have every child reading at or above grade level no later than the end of 3rd grade. We pass goals that say 60% is fine, and you don't have a plan because you don't talk about it, you don't make it a priority. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed.
Our next speaker is Sandy Hayner.
Hello, friends. It's like a little reunion here. You're new. Okay, so Sandy Hayner. Given what the previous speaker just brought up, it kind of makes my concerns even more elevated. I'm here to talk to you about policy. It's new, right? You revoked policy 201.3, and you said that you did so because it was repetitive. And so the part about 201.3 that I was interested in was the part about public input. And it says, input from students, staff, parents, and community members in major decisions can be valuable for assistance to the board. And so then it goes through a list of you're going to have the sign up and how long people get, and you've been violating that this entire time, which you haven't cared about. But the notion that that was repetitive is why you got rid of all of it. You didn't just revoke the unconstitutional parts. You got rid of all of it because you said, well, that shows up in 206, except it doesn't. Because 206, as Cherry pointed out 100 times, it is not about public forum. It is about getting things added to the agenda. And so that kept coming up over and over again. You guys were asking questions about speaking at open forum. No. This is just about getting something added to the agenda. And so all of these words about how important it is to hear from your community are not listed in 207 at all. The closest that you get is something called open forum, which you've crossed out and now called public comment. The school board shall provide a specified period of time, which is weirdly unspecified. It does not say anywhere in here when and where that is going to happen. And then it goes on, you guys go on to 207, which then you said very clearly, this is also not pertaining to open forum. This is just public hearings, which we have once, which is truth and taxation, or if we decide to close more schools, I guess. And so all of the things in 207 that said when people get to come and speak to the board, you've removed those too. All of that is redlined. And so, you referenced the December meeting when you talked about all these ideas of community engagement, except that I listened in on that meeting, and everything you talked about was deferred to the Community Engagement Committee, which you have dissolved. There is no such thing as the Community Engagement Committee. So getting rid of policies that guarantee the community a right to be heard, since you are spending all of our money on a $250,000 bathroom, getting rid of any guarantee that we get to say anything about that, while not replacing it with any sort of solid language about how that's going to happen, I would encourage you to table policy 206 approval tonight. I know Vivian had questions about it. Pete, you were unclear. Tina obviously had reservations. And so it feels like you're up to some shenanigans. And if you're not up to them today, then you're just setting the tone for the shenanigans. So community, heads up. And my second question is, I was part of the World's Best Workforce Community, and we created the goals that you were supposed to be assessing in June of this year. And so I can't find those goals anywhere on your website, and so I'm wondering, where are those posted? When were they voted on and adopted? And so if you could just email me those, that would be super fantastic. You guys have my contact information. Have a great night.
All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. Joan, roll call, please.
Director Hockert?
Here.
Director Kelsenberg?
Here.
Director Petrie?
Here.
Director Porbeni?
Yep.
Director Riley?
Here.
Director Patava?
Here.
Chair Sherman?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next, approval of agenda. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Director Petrie, I will second that. All those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next, we're going to go to the Superintendent Report. Superintendent Funk.
So that is interesting picture there. This is a picture of the back-to-school event that we had for all staff on Tuesday morning. A little different this year. We did it outside, and I think that's been the first time in a number of years, I think, that the staff did it outside. And it was a great welcome back for the staff. It was a beautiful morning. We had a focus on self-care for the staff, as you can see in the pictures there. We were doing a little yoga with Dr. Jennifer Clifton from the University of Minnesota, who really talked about having to take care of oneself in order to best meet the needs of our students. So it was a really great morning, and Allison had a very nice message for the district, in addition to Dr. Clifton, and I had a few words myself. So great kickoff. And here's a quick little video for you.
Our kids are dancing, by the way. They're loving this. Arms down.
Yoga to
One more time.
AC/DC Back in Black.
Good. Now bend. Bring it into your body fully. Bring it up. Bring it back.
So this is the first time in 3 years, I think, that the whole staff have been back together. So it was a great event.
Our kids are dancing,
Okay,
by the
we
way.
don't need to watch it again. One of the things that I've heard as we get closer and closer to school, there are some concerns from folks in the community about elementary class sizes, and especially when we're hearing some talk on academics tonight. So I've started to delve into this a little bit since I've only been here since early July. And on the left there, we have our board-approved class size ranges, and you can see they range from 21 in K1 all the way up to, on the high end, 32.42 in grades 4 and 5. These are historically a little bit larger than I think folks would like to see, but from what I'm understanding is we take some general ed revenue and we hire interventionists with that. And so rather than reduce some of the class sizes, we are taking money to pay for interventionists to meet the needs of the students who need the extra help. This is in addition to federal dollars that we receive and state dollars for interventionists. So this will be one of the conversations that I have with our principals later on this fall. How's that model working for us? Is it effective, or would it be more efficient and effective if we were to take some of those intervention pieces and move them into class size reduction? So that will be an ongoing discussion. But I wanted to kind of give a little bit of a why on what I'm hearing as far as the class size ranges here. And then the other thing that I think is really important for folks to hear about is our standard response protocol that we have. The district has standardized an approach to really emergency situations, and all the staff has been through training on it this week. And it's consistent language that we will be using throughout the district. So instead of hearing if there's an altercation in a hallway, the district historically would say, okay, we need to go into a lockdown. Well, people hear lockdown, there's immediately, okay, that's got a really bad thing associated with it. So instead of lockdown, the principal could now come on the loudspeaker and say, hold, we need you to hold in your rooms, or secure. And then if they do say lockdown, okay, people will know that is significantly more serious. Evacuate, or if there's a tornado or a bad storm, shelter. So we feel it's important to have a universal system in place when dealing with school emergencies. And so all staff received an hour of training regarding this over the last day or two. So again, I think, and a message came out for me earlier today about school safety. And really there's two components that I really like to emphasize. One is the proactive approach, and what we're doing as a district to really work with kids who are struggling and may have some mental health concerns or needs. And then the second approach, of course, is what we are doing as a district to make sure if something does happen, and it's not necessarily a student, it could be anybody from the outside, are we prepared for that to happen as well? So that's my report this evening. Thank you.
Great. All right, and we'll look forward to hearing more information from you yet to come, so appreciate the update. I do not have any update, and so with that, we'll put the consent agenda on the screen. And I will go ahead and make the motion to approve tonight's consent agenda. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Great, thank you, Director Hocker. All those in favor of approving tonight's consent agenda, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, we're going to move into tonight's action items. Our first action item is action item A, bus garage restroom project. We're going to turn it over to Mark Drummerhausen. I want to just kind of very quickly remind the board, it's just good for us to keep in mind that the scope of what we're looking at tonight is the bathroom project, which we've talked about previously. I want to make sure that because the bus garage as a total project is in litigation, we just want to be mindful of that for our community members, so. Okay, with that, we'll turn it over to Mark.
Good evening, Chair Sherman, Superintendent Funk, and members of the board. First, I'll introduce the guest here to my left, John Hunick, with Kraus Anderson, who's here to join me to help answer questions here at the end. But tonight, we're asking approval for approval of the bids and for the total project for the bus garage restroom project. Currently, we have 3 toilets on site at the bus garage, and we moved in MEA of last year. And by code, both OSHA and building code, we need to have at least 6 toilets within our bus garage facility. Last year, we brought in porta potties to meet that requirement of 6 restrooms. And so far this year, we continue to have porta potties. But moving forward, we'd like to have more permanent toilets to meet both our OSHA and building code for that facility. We are going to use a portion of the office space which is adjacent to our current restroom to add these additional 3 toilets to that facility. Earlier, last spring, when this project was talked about and brought to the board, we estimated a budget about $175,000 for this project out of our capital fund. Our bids that we opened last week actually came in higher than we expected, and we are seeking approval of $283,429. Now, I will notice that is higher than what is in your board packet. We did have earlier this week Massive Mechanical, which is the low bidder at the time. They backed out of their bid, and so we're recommending the next lowest bidder, which is Davis Mechanical, and that would be an $8,985 increase to what's in your packet. So it's a $283,429 price that we're asking, and we're asking to approve both the bids and the total project tonight. As far as the bids go, we had good coverage. So we had 7 different work scopes that were part of this project, and we had 30 different bids. So if you kind of take that, we had about 4 or 5 different bids for each one of our work scopes. So we did have good coverage, and the price range between those bids were pretty consistent. There weren't any really high or really low prices in there. People that bid on this project were very consistent with their price range. So with that, I will open it up to any comments or questions that you have for myself or Mr. Hunick here for Kraus Anderson.
Great. Director Petrie.
Mark and John, maybe you can put this into a little bit of perspective for us. I mean, that's considerably more than what was estimated. What are we seeing here? What's the reason for that?
Well, and maybe I'll answer that. Thank you. So at early conception, it's going to be a long answer. At early conception, when what was discussed on the restrooms was we need to add a couple restrooms. And I thought $100,000 seems like plenty for a restroom. Once the architect's world got into design, there's a lot more square footage, or significantly more, at least in the size of these restrooms, that was affected. Instead of a couple hundred square feet, it's close to 400 square feet. There's actually 4 individual, you could call them family style or unisex type restrooms. One of them being ADA compliant, which obviously we need per code. Because of that, there's a lot of additional ceramic tile. Each individual restroom has its own exhaust, HVAC, electrical, sanitary. Also, because of the remodel, we had to add in a cleaning area and a mop sink. There's a lot of floor cutting that ended up having to get done, and because of that floor cutting that goes into a corridor, there was also new carpet in those corridors because, you know, I have to saw up the floor to put the sanitary in. So the scope actually grew a lot since the conception of the $100,000 or $170,000 budget. So that grew. Now, is inflation real? Yes. Economies of scale, very little or none when you're talking about a 400 square feet of remodel of space. So all of those compiled to where the bids came at. Looking at these drawings today, what the original thought was, there's just a significantly a lot more work happening that needs to happen for code reasons. So that's the long answer, Bev, to your.
Thank you.
Really quick, I'm sure that this has been looked at, but it's obviously a small space. Is there anything that can be done to change the scope to reduce the cost in terms of materials selected, or has anything been looked at to get this cost down?
Yeah, well, I spent some, no one coming here tonight. I took a look at that, and your standard restrooms, toilets, tile for cleaning, ductwork, there's not a lot of fancy finishes.
Okay.
By all means, it's pretty straightforward.
Pretty basic. Okay. Director Hocker?
Considering how much more expensive these bids are coming in, do we have room in the budget to continue forward with this project? And if not, is there a plan B?
Yes, we do have room in our capital budget for this.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Director Riley?
I just have a few frustrations with this moving forward. I mean, when we started this project, we were at, property that was valued under $2 million, and now we're at a project that is at almost $8.5 million. And so we're almost $5 million over the $3.5 million that was initially set for this project. We're talking tonight about interventionists and academics and money, and utilizing the capital budget for continual real estate issues instead of incorporating some of the technology reasons that we could actually pay salary out of that for some of our technology areas to free up some space in our capital or in our general budget to then maybe hire to better serve our kids. And I don't think this is a good use of our dollars, quite honestly. It seems like a money pit. This entire project has seemed like a money pit. Not against it once we got started. We had the investment in it, but I'm not a fan of continuing to pour money into it when our job is to educate kids and we're failing at it. And so I really struggle with putting our money there and not in our classrooms. So I'll be voting no on this project.
Director Hocker?
I had a quick follow-up question to my last question. So if we are pulling more out of the capital budget, I believe there's another project coming up, the transitions project, where I think we might be getting bids coming up. Is this a harbinger of what's to come with more high bids, or how is that? Is that going to throw us off track?
We actually open up bids this afternoon at 2 o'clock for the transition. So at the next meeting, actually the work session on September 8th, we'll be coming for approval of the transition project. Our bids actually came in on budget. We're slightly under by about 200,000. So it was a good day that we're on budget. So in terms of sign of things to come, in terms of that project, we're on scope. This one's a little higher, but we're still working out the final details and contacting all the low bidders and those sorts of things. So I don't want to give you an exact figure here because we have to call all those work scopes, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves in the next meeting. But after first blush this morning, we're right on budget for our transition project remodel here at Oak Park.
Okay, good news, thank you.
Yeah, good news.
Yes.
I guess that my question is, my understanding is that we need the bus garage because we have a very large district that spans like 35 miles, and this allows the buses to park somewhere near the center of the district, which actually reduces our busing costs over time. And the bathrooms, we don't have a choice on, right, because they're required by code. Is that correct?
We need to provide, building and OSHA code are a little bit different, but the higher one is 6. So we need to provide at least 6 individual restrooms or 6 toilets within that facility to meet code. And so we have been doing that with porta potties, but since that is our facility and we'll be having that for a number of years, we would like to get that building up to code so we can get that project done and move on and not have to continue with porta potties year after year.
So essentially, the choice here is for our transportation staff, including our bus drivers, many of which are community members, they're using porta potties.
Correct.
All seasons right now, unless we get this done. Okay. Anyone else? Great. Is there a motion tonight?
I'll move.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Or,
Director Kelsenberg? You would?
Yeah, I make the motion to approve the expenditure.
Great.
then I'll second it.
Okay. Director Hockett seconds. Any additional comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving tonight's project to add permanent bathrooms to the transportation site, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes. Thank you
you.
very much. All right, our next action item is Stillwater Middle School Resource Officer. contract. And Mark, you're staying with us.
Perfect, thank you. Tonight, we're seeking approval of a school resource officer or SRO contract for Stillwater Middle School. We have SROs at all of our secondary buildings. We have, at the high school, we have a full-time person from Oak Park Police Department. At Oakland Middle School, we have a full-time person from Washington County Sheriff Department. And in the past, Stillwater Middle has had a half-time person from Stillwater Police Department. So in this contract, we're looking to get Stillwater Middle School to have the same service as the other secondary schools, to have a full-time person at Stillwater Middle School. So this person will be full-time at Stillwater Middle School, but we're only gonna pay 75% of their contract. Because in the summer months or on non-student contact days, that person will be an employee of the Stillwater Police Department, so they will have oversight of their duties. So they'll be full-time for us, but in terms of payment of that contract, we're only gonna pay 75% because we will not have that person for the full calendar year. So with that, again, I'm open up to any questions or comments that you may have about the SRO contract at Stillwater Middle.
Go ahead, sorry.
What's the funding source, Mark?
Oh, it's out of the Safe Schools Fund.
Yeah.
So it's not out of the general fund, it's out of our Safe Schools. Thank you.
Is there a motion on the floor? Director Porbeni?
I'd like to move a motion.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay, so we have a first and a second to approve the addition of essentially, I guess, elevating it, it's not a full-time position,
Half of
but.
a 75%
Half of
person.
a 75%. Okay, thank you very much. All right, all those, is there any more discussion, I guess, on this? Okay, I guess I'd like to just say I appreciate in this time with the safety concerns that are going on in our schools, I really appreciate staff looking at the equity across all of our buildings and getting everyone on par and positioning us to be as safe as we possibly can. So thank you. All those in favor of approving this, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mark. All right, we have 2 action items for policy. We're going to start with action item C, which is approving policy 206, which is public participation in school board meetings and data privacy considerations. And then we're going to turn it over to Dr. Cherry and probably Director Hockert as well.
All right, thanks, Chairman, members of the board, Superintendent Funk. I've been in front of you a few different times talking about policy 206. This is public participation in school board meetings and data privacy considerations. When we discussed this after our last meeting, we have not had any additional comments or recommendations that have moved forward. So at this time, it's pretty simple, just asking for a recommendation to make a motion to approve the revised policy as stated.
Great. Anything to add? Dr. Hockert?
Yes, I will, and I would like to make a motion to approve this. And then I also have a few just kind of follow-up comments as well.
Second. Okay, Director Petrie second, and then you want to start the discussion?
Sure. So I just want to take a minute tonight to acknowledge all of the effort that has gone into this policy as part of the community engagement policy package. This is one of several policies that we've been reviewing. These last 2 are kind of the final tail end of our community engagement journey that we began about a year ago, last September in 2021. And along the way, we had a work session where the board got to give us some input. We had a community member watch and bring that up even tonight. So there was a lot of ideas that we integrated from the community. We did a community survey. We did kind of a look at our current practices in our open forum and community engagement across the district. And we also had a discussion as a board to kind of evaluate and figure out what improvements we would like to pursue. Then it got turned back over to the policy committee to look into those ideas, and we've had several conversations since then. It's been a while. And some of those have been put into practice. One of the first ones we did was opening up our open forum sign up to be closed just 15 minutes before our board meeting. That was one of the recommendations that the board made at that meeting. Another big one was to survey the community more extensively to get more information. And just at our last meeting, we did have the results of our market research survey that also kind of was ticked that box of board engagement, engaging the community. So a lot of work has gone into this package, and in July, we finally settled on what we would bring to the board as the policy 206, and eventually 207 as well. And we have now had our 2 readings, and we've integrated feedback from board members, and we've actually included procedural links to the bottom of both of these policies. That was one of the requests, that in taking out procedural language from our policies, we wanted to make sure it was very clear to the community that we do in fact have procedures and where exactly to find them. So those are definitely included, and we really appreciate all the efforts that have gone in from the board members, from the community, stakeholders, and all the input that's gone into this. And we're happy to bring it forward to the board for our final action.
So we have a motion and a second. Any remaining discussion? Director Riley?
Thank you. So the public comment procedures are what are going to be linked in the website, right? The district website. And I don't, like I said, I can't link it out of this packet, but a couple of questions I have too here are that it says the school board should promptly rule out of order any discussion, you know, on page 206, 5, or 45, and number 2, 3, and 4. And so I guess my concerns there are, you know, we've already had an issue during last year where the police were here and the board chair tried to shut down the community. And I know we have in here that these are the procedures the board chair will follow. However, the only way really to enforce any of these is to shut down the meeting. And so I'm not sure putting things in written as these are makes sense, because they don't have any teeth to them. I mean, you don't really have much control over the public unless they are disorderly or threatening, right? And so, I mean, you can't make somebody leave a public meeting when they have a right to be at the public meeting. So I just don't know how you shut somebody down and make them sit down. And what's the gauge of the offense, right? Who gauges that? It's such what's offensive to one person isn't necessarily offensive to another person. And so I do have concerns over how this is written. I would like to table these, actually. I would like to make a motion to table these and kind of iron this part out so it's a little bit more clear. I don't, like I said, you can't, your only option here is to shut down a meeting. I mean, you can't really kick somebody out of a meeting unless they are violating the law.
We need any other? I guess, well, we would need a motion to table. We need a second to the amendment, I guess, or, so is there anyone else interested in tabling the policy? Okay. Seeing no second, that fails. We're going to continue the discussion on the motion and the second on the floor. Dr. Petrie.
I agree with Director Riley that the whole idea of personal attacks is a vague term. But I guess the way I look at this is, you know, a long time ago, I think in the Supreme Court, they said it was a discussion about pornography, and it was kind of like, you know it when you see it. And I think that having this in the policy sets an expectation for the public. And that's kind of the way I see it, because I just don't know that you can actually define, you know, down to the tiniest detail what a personal attack would mean. But this just means that we're setting an expectation for the public, and so I would like to see that stay in there. The next sentence, persistence in such remarks by an individual shall terminate that person's privilege to address the school board. I mean, I think that is probably something that we could affect over time. We don't have to listen to everyone who wants to speak. And if a person has been abusive in the past, I mean, we wouldn't necessarily have to do that. So, I mean, I think that this one just sets an expectation for the public, and so I would just prefer to keep it in.
Dr. Hawker?
And I'll just add to Director Petrie's point that I did dig into this personal attacks at some point. I called MSBA for some clarification on this, and the answer that I would get is very similar of the kind of, you know it when you see it for the personal attacks. Unfortunately, it's not clearly defined in the law, and as court cases evolve, different precedents are being set. So it's really hard to pin down in policy language anything better, because I certainly tried, and we just kind of came up empty-handed. So I do still support the language in here, because I think that's as good as it's going to get, at least at the policy level. Director Riley?
I mean, we all endure this as a public official. I endure probably more than anybody's share up here of personal attacks and have so at the mic. But I guess, again, I'm going to go back to the only real way that you can prevent them from speaking would be to get a restraining order of some sort. So again, you're going into a legal issue. So I don't know how you would weigh that into what you're saying here with these policies, because again, you're going into legal ramifications. You would have to, define a case of harassment or so on or so forth before you could stop them from speaking. I mean, this to me is getting into really kind of a slippery slope, and I know it's deep into this conversation, but I think it's worth exploring that we want to hear from our community. It's not always comfortable, and it can be painful, and it's okay. And I'm not a fan of shutting people down. Let them say their piece, let them be heard, and then move on. So I really kind of struggle with some of the language in here.
Can I just get some clarification? Because this is the language that has been in this policy.
Yeah,
So that did not get updated.
Correct. This is not updated language. It's been in our policy.
It's been in the policy. So I think there's that to consider, right? That and we haven't received any feedback up to this point. I mean, I just want to make sure that the board is aware that when we bring these 3 times, I know that the policy work is tedious. Thank you again for all that the policy committee, that's just so the community knows, Dr. Porbeni, Dr. Cherry, Director Hocker, and Director Petrie. So thank you all for the work. I just think when we have these conversations, we need to make sure that I'm not in favor of tabling it. I did not support that because I want to keep policy moving. And this is something that's going to come back annually. I think that we could maybe mark some of these comments, that area, as something to kind of look at next year when we're reviewing this. But I don't see this as us trying to limit public comment, because I look at the piece with the data privacy. And I look at it as it's less about talking to elected officials for me and more about speaking to staff about staff or students or violating private data that could put the district in legal peril. And so I guess for me, that's where I tend to draw the line. I don't think that this is really about when someone comes up as evident tonight. No one tried to shut down, and it was critical of the board. So for me, the distinction is between staff and students and their data that has to be legally private. Yes?
Right, well, this is a board meeting, not a staff meeting, so it's expected that they're coming to speak to the board, but we're in a different time than we were in the past. We've seen this board already try to shut down public comment in recent months. And this is still part of the process. So even though questions may not have arose in the first or second reading, does not negate the fact that they are allowed to arise on the third reading. So I don't appreciate the condemnation of me, bringing this up now. And who knows if community members have reached out with concerns since then as well. So this is still part of the process, and it's allowed to happen.
Yes. I can confirm we've not heard anything from community members. At least I have not.
But I may have.
Dr. Cherry. Then please
I
forward
just
them.
did.
Okay, can I call the vote or whatever you call it?
Yes,
Can I suggest we vote on this?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
To call the question.
Is there anyone that objects? Okay, so I think we've had this discussion, and we'll go ahead and vote. So all those in favor of approving policy 206, public participation in school board meetings and data privacy considerations, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes. Okay, we're going to move on to our last action item of the evening, and that is policy 207. We're going to have Dr. Cherry again start us off. This is our public hearings policy.
Thank you, Chair Sherman, members of the board. Policy 207 on public hearings, again, this is the third time this has been brought to the board. I have not been aware of any additional comments or questions from any board directors or community members at this time. And so with that, I'm going to make a recommendation and ask for a motion to approve the revised copy of policy 207.
Great. So we can have the discussion. Is there a motion that wants to be made? Director Porbeni? Doctor, I should say, doctor. Go ahead. Okay, so to approve. Is there a second? Okay, we've got a first and a second. Discussion. Director Riley.
I just want to echo everything I just said, again pertaining to this policy as well. Again, it's language I think that really needs to be looked at because it's very vague and addressing, and in order to be enforced, everybody has their constitutional rights, and so that supersedes anything. So, yeah, same concerns.
Great. Anyone else that would like to comment? Did you have your hand up, or? No. Okay, you did not. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion, we'll go ahead and take the vote. All those in favor of passing policy 207, public hearings, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Great, motion passes. All right, now we're going to move on to our reports for the evening and on to a first reading for policy 905, advertising. And you're back, so
back.
introduce it. And I do have feedback on this and questions, so.
Okay, sounds good. Chair Sherman and board directors, this is a first reading of an advertising policy. This is a new policy being presented to the board that we have not had previously. The purpose here is to provide some guidelines for advertising or promoting of products or services to our students, our parents, and our schools. There actually is an example of how some of this plays out in our schools that brought us to the need to really have a policy in place. Oftentimes we are asked by different businesses and individuals in our community who would like to display advertisements on our school district property. And we have not had real clear guidelines on how to make that happen. If we are going to be receiving any kind of benefit, donations, funds, or anything in response for agreeing to those. We haven't had any policy in place to facilitate that transaction. And so that's what you see before you is some guidelines for us to move forward with that in a consistent manner, and also to ensure that we have properly accounted for our fiscal responsibilities on top of that, and ensure that we are in compliance with our UFARs in coding and providing reports to the school board, and ensuring that we are informed of how those revenues are coming in and how we are approving the advertisements as they are requested. So with that, I'm open to any questions that you might have. Again, this is a first reading, and we imagine that there will be questions.
Right. And mine were just more comments. I don't have the answers, but just maybe more discussion for the policy committee, or maybe you've already had those discussions and you can share those here. But under accounting, and I guess I was just wondering with gifts and donations, we have those right now reported to us in our board packet. Does this change anything? Does this policy alter the current process, or are we suggesting altering the process? Has that been had?
Thank you for the question, and actually that's right where we discussed how that report would come to you and the board, is on that same report with gifts and donations. So this is a different, a little bit different than a gift in that the advertiser is actually receiving a service for
okay.
the contribution of that money.
So that would be a report,
But it would be a report.
similar
yes.
to the,
Similar.
okay.
I have a question. Does the policy allow religious organizations to put in proselytizing information?
So there is a
'Cause
section.
they would be nonprofit, right?
They could be for-profit organizations, but they would be reviewed, all of the advertising would be reviewed. You can see in section 3, A, that there are specific publications where we would not allow the types of advertising. Again, these are advertisings that are going in school buildings, public school buildings, and would be viewable not only by our students, which we're concerned about, but also by the public. So there are some very specific limitations there.
And I just want to add to that, that was kind of my other question, was just in that section A. It didn't specifically call out religious or political, but I could see like, I didn't know if political, campaigning, advertising, that sort of thing would be permissible.
All of that would be prohibited as well. Those are all additional things that are covered in our materials distribution policy.
And that's
it
kind of
would
what
follow the same guidelines.
Okay,
And that's in statute.
yeah. I just didn't know if we would want to include, or do you ever link to other policies in a policy? I didn't.
Sometimes they are cross-referenced.
Okay.
They reference them at the bottom typically.
The vote, our internal, because I know we do statute, but I didn't know if we did our internal policies, but I don't know. If it's all covered in, I just didn't want to have two different policies, or I know we have the materials distribution kind of policy, just to make sure that they're in line and, you know.
I know I've been contacted by people in the Cub Scouts, and the Cub Scout troops have really been hurt by the fact that they've been told they're not allowed to put any information into the elementary schools. And so I'm hoping that these policies don't prohibit that. Maybe, and it's different maybe for different schools, but it has really hurt the Cub Scout troops because suddenly they've been told they can't, like, tell people
look into
about
that.
the Cub Scout troop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
Just
Dr.
a-
Tucker.
Just a clarification, is it that they are not allowed at all, or that they have to use, there's a electronic, like Peachtree?
I think the peach
that
tree,
we-
they can only use the peach tree, but that doesn't really work. So they want to be able to like put up flyers or hold, some events, and they're not allowed to do that.
I think Peachtree had, the feedback in open form that we've received has been it's cost prohibitive for some smaller groups,
Okay.
so. That was all my comments at a first read. If there aren't any other comments, I again would say this is just the first read. Dr. Cherry and the policy committee specifically, I guess, utilize Director Hockert for that. Appreciate the feedback, both from the community, ideas, feedback, input, and also from the board. So with that, we're going to close that discussion and adjourn to a closed session. Let me get my language out. Okay, the statutory basis for closing this meeting is the Minnesota Open Meeting Law, Minnesota Statutes 13D.05, subdivision 2B, that authorizes the school board to close a meeting for preliminary consideration, charges against an individual subject to its authority, and there are board allegations regarding an employee requiring consideration by the school board. In addition, the Minnesota Open Meeting Law, Minnesota Statute Section 13D.05, Subdivision 3B, authorizes the school board to close a meeting for the purpose of attorney-client privilege, and the school board needs to meet with its attorney in a confidential setting to obtain advice regarding potential imminent legal action related to the school district's allegations and defenses in an employment matter. I will entertain a motion to adjourn into a closed session. Does someone want to make that motion?
So moved.
Great. Director Hockert, and a second. Director Porbeni. All those in favor? Raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. The open meeting is now closed and will re-adjourn after the closed session of the board is completed.